Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Poulan P4018 Wild Thing. Customer complaint is that it won't start. Looking in the fuel tank here, and it looks kind of suspicious. It's really red, and sometimes that could be true fuel, maybe. In this case, we give it a sniff, and it's clearly stable, fuel stabilizer. And it's a pretty heavy concentration of it. Now, maybe, I've seen it before where people pretty much fill the tank with stable. They don't add, a couple ounces per gallon or whatever it is. They add stable to an empty tank. Well, the idea is you got to run the stable through the carburetor after you put it in the tank so that it treats the fuel in the carburetor as well. If you just dump in the tank, well, the fuel in the tank isn't going to get bad. It's also not going to burn if you got that high a ratio. Anyway, this thing won't start. We're going to dig into it a little bit and see why. Besides reasons that it's running on straight stable. We got a handy dandy torch spark plug in here. I'm not saying that's why it's not running. I'm just saying it's got a torch spark plug in it. It didn't come with that. Cylinder looked good, so we don't have any scoring in here. So we're going to take the air filter cover or air filter plate holder. We're going to take that off. One screw, two nuts. The goal here is to take the carburetor off and look inside. Choke lever comes off. Throttle linkage just slides out. The rod just slides out of the handle. And we manipulate that rod out of the carburetor linkage. Now we want to get the fuel lines off. And these are on there pretty darn good. Take my handy dandy scrunch and start prying. Now the lines feel really pliable. Normally I have to replace the lines on these saws. These feel really good. So I'm trying not to wreck too much here. But you can see I'm kind of scraping over the side of that fuel line while I'm trying to pry it off. Later we'll trim that fuel line back before we put this back into service. We want to open up this carb and see what the metering diaphragm looks like. There's two screws on the back here that hold this plate on. It's got the upper throttle plate on it. And just take a good look at that linkage before you take it apart so you put it back together the right way. Here's our pump diaphragm cover. Underneath here we'll find the micro screen. It looks alright. We'll get this diaphragm cover off of here, metering diaphragm cover. And it's stuck down pretty good. It's also pretty stiff. Click, click. Yeah, they're not supposed to make noise. So the fact that it's stiff means it can't move up and down. It can't push on the metering lever to open the needle to allow fuel into the carburetor. So we're going to have to replace that. And we replace the whole carb kit as at the same time. Now, those of you that have been watching the channel may not have seen this little stand here before. If you look close, that's just a piece of 3-inch angle iron with 2 1/8 inch in diameter, maybe 3/16 metal rods welded to it. So I got myself a little carburetor stand. It turned out to be pretty handy. Okay, I'm cleaning off my new needle. And I'm going to hang it in the metering lever. The spring is already in the base of the carburetor. And I kind of dropped it. So let's pick it back up. This time we're going to try and scoop the needle because it's already in the hole. There, we kind of scooped it up. We're trying to hold the spring in place, and then we're going to slide that rod across to get it locked underneath the screw. Get everything lined up and snugged down. I didn't do it, and maybe it's just because visually it looked alright, and maybe it's because I used the old metering lever, but I should have checked the metering lever height at that point. I didn't even realize that till just editing this video, that I'd never checked that height. So this is our pump side of the carburetor, and that's our fuel pump right there. It's our fuel pump diaphragm and a gasket. Pulses from the engine work on that pump, make that diaphragm move back and forth, and that's what sucks the fuel up out of the tank. We'll clean up some old gasket here on the cover, and then I'm going to hold the throttle linkage open a little bit because that idle adjustment screw is on the cover, and it's actually, it could deflect the cover while you're trying to line it up on top of the carburetor. So I just hold the throttle linkage open so it's out of the way and the pieces don't touch while you're assembling it. We'll get this linkage hooked back up the way it was and screw this plate back down into place. Those are some really small screws on there. Bang! Put away our new carb tool. Got a magnet on the back of it so it just sticks to the box. Now I'm pushing fuel lines on here. And remember, these fuel lines were... I scraped them all up with the scrunch while I pulled them off. The ends kind of got a memory to them. They don't want to fit on there decent. So I'm going to trim them back and get rid of any damaged end on that line. I mean, if I'm not going to replace it, I'm going to have to do it this way. This one's fighting me. It's hard to get at. So we'll just slide the carburetor right off of there and stick it on. Now you see that first line I put on the other side, that fell off already. So we're going to trim that one up and push it on tight as well. Now we have our throttle rod. Pretty easy as far as throttle rods go. Torch. We'll get a different spark plug in here. Not just because it was a torch plug. I mean, torch plugs aren't terrible, but it was carboned up pretty bad. So there's our choke lever, and we're going to put this air filter base plate back on. Kind of fighting me a little bit there, but we got it. 2 nuts and the 1 screw. There's the screw. All right. Little function check on our throttle. So we're going to put some fuel in here, and if this thing starts, that's all I'm going to have for you on the Poulan P4018 Wild Thing carb refresh. Thanks for watching. Later.